Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi everyone, Mason Clement here. Before we get into today's episode, I wanted to ask you one question. Are you sick of the wild swings in the stock market and ready to try something different? Did you know that investing in stocks actually put you at the very bottom of a company's capital structure, meaning that there's practically 0% chance that you're going to get any of your money back in the event that the company files bankruptcy? So basically, you're putting yourself in the riskiest position for a questionable return. Personally, I hate the unpredictability and just waking up and having half of my investment gone when I didn't do anything wrong. So what a lot of people don't know is that you can actually make higher returns on a consistent basis by investing in the opposite end of the capital structure, which is actually the safest place to be, which is on the debt side in a first lien position. And you can do that by investing in real estate, and specifically investing with my company in notes that are backed by the land that we purchase. So if you're ready to diversify your income stream, go ahead and go over to scalablerei.com and click on invest in the top right corner. There you're going to find a form that you can fill out to determine if you're eligible to invest with my company, Celion Capital, and we'll be reaching out to you to schedule an introductory call and speak more from there. So thanks a lot, and let's jump into the episode. Hi, Scalable Investors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today we have with us Joe Marques, who is the founder of Marlaw Investments LLC and has been involved in the real estate game for many, many years, doing several different things: turnkey, subdivisions, multifamily, condos. Just happy to have him on the show, especially as we jump into the land development topics, things like that. So without further ado, Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mason. Thank you for inviting me. I hope I add some value to you and your viewers as we go through this.
Perfect. Well, what I'd like to do, starting out, in case people aren't familiar with your background, why don't you just tell us your story and your journey that got you to today?
Well, I was raised on a ranch, and I think that was where my love for improving land came, because my granddaddy was constantly cleaning fence rows, clearing for pasture, building barns, and different things like that. I actually went to college in environmental science to be a wildlife biologist and game warden, and ended up working for a little bitty company called Chemical Waste Management. Traveled all over the world doing environmental remediation. That's where my hazardous background and chemicals and things like that comes from. Then basically started my own company doing government contracting, again, traveling all over the world. But the love of the land and improving, and that was the great thing about the environmental remediation and the government contracting as well. It was always trying to improve land. One, from the environmental remediation side, was cleaning up somebody else's mess. The government contracting, I did a lot of emergency watershed protection. That was try to reduce flooding and the severity of flooding on various waterways and things like that. So it was still connected to the land. And then I transitioned back into actual land development. And I had been investing in real estate while I had my government contracting company, was doing fix and flips and then buy and hold single family residential for rentals. But the development was what really sparked my interest. So I just basically did what everybody tells you not to do. I skipped all the steps to move up to land development and started pretty much straight into land development, other than what I was buying to hold for rentals.
Okay. So what are those steps that are usually recommended before someone just jumps right into land development?
Well, the biggest thing is knowing the order of construction. Fix and flip is a great way to get into land development. because you start learning that there's different stages, like you've got the mobilization and then set up, and then you've got different things that you have to do in order. Like you don't hang sheetrock on a fix and flip before you've fixed any plumbing and wiring. Knowing the order of construction, it's very similar when you go into land development. You wouldn't want to put in your sidewalks before you've put in your utilities, your underground utilities. And it's just understanding that there's an order to different steps in the construction process. And then the only difference is land development has a longer lead time than a standard fix and flip, because you have your permitting process going through, even if it's zoned and you can build a project by right, there's still various agencies you have to go through to get the permitting process. Like down here in Baldwin County, the biggest thing we run across on the island is the beach mouse. It's a endangered species that it's, well, I'll keep this politically correct for the viewers here and PG rated. The beach mouse has more rights than any other living in creature on the island, because it's considered an endangered species. So it's a real long drawn out process to get that in there. If you're not aware of it, it can hold you up. And then just knowing what entities you have to go through and getting the approval process. It's a longer process, and you have to make sure that you have enough reserves to be able to handle your personal life in that process, because it can be a year to 2 year process to get a development project approved and actual started construction.
Okay. And is that 1 to 2 year period for generally any construction type project?
It depends on if you're trying to get it approved development wise. If it's already approved, you've got different things. You can have a project that's approved development wise with plans ready to go. Then you can start construction. You apply for a building permit or land disturbance permit if you have to clear, and then you can start building. However, if you've got raw land, then usually you have to go through several steps. You have to go through planning and zoning to get the theoretical project approved, and you have to have drawings for that. Then you have to finalize drawings based on the back and forth with them to go to a formal planning and zoning meeting. That's usually a public hearing. And even if something is by right, you still have to go through those steps just from a formality standpoint. And then if it's not by right, then it could be multiple more steps. And what I mean by right is if a parcel is zoned for what you're trying to build and you meet all of the planning and zoning guidelines, such as setbacks, building height, things like that, and what fits for that zoning, then by right you can build there. They technically can't deny you, but they do still have a public hearing process for that.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And what I've been learning as I'm subdividing land is that there's different procedures throughout different counties and I guess different timelines. So would you agree that it also kind of depends on the local jurisdiction?
It's greatly dependent upon each local jurisdiction and what entity. Like some counties are easier than the cities that are inside the county, and then sometimes it's the exact opposite. Sometimes it's easier to build inside the city limits than it is in the county. And some states are easier. Some counties within an easy state can be very difficult to build in, and some counties in what is considered a difficult state can be relatively easy to build in. And one of the keys is developing the relationships with the jurisdictions you're working in. Like if you're planning and zoning director for the county, take them out to lunch and ask them what are their visions for any jurisdiction. Take them out to lunch and ask them what are their visions for, what do they want to see their jurisdiction to look like. And then if you can plan your stuff around what they, or at least sell your stuff to them based on their vision for what they're trying to accomplish, It makes the process a lot easier. Same thing as if you're trying to do a development in an area that has neighbors. Have a public meeting before you ever apply for planning and zoning, and sell the benefits to them and how it's going to benefit them first. Because what happens in planning and zoning meetings, the ones that are against it will come out, but the ones that support it, they're like, okay, well, there's no reason for me to come out. You have to get in front of them and bring the support, because planning and zoning boards are usually, in a lot of jurisdictions, are elected boards. And definitely when you get to final approval, which would either be city council or the county commissioners, those are definitely elected positions. And if their perception is everybody's against it, nobody's for it, you're going to have a much harder time getting the project approved.
That's definitely interesting. So I've definitely heard of having meetings with county commissioners and other officials, but haven't heard about having it with the neighbors. So is it like is there some publication or something that lets people know there's some town hall meeting? How's that work?
Well, usually what we do is we go door to door, especially if it's in an area that we haven't developed. Well, to tell you a quick story. What taught me this lesson really well is I was involved in a development in North Dakota, and one of the partners was, let's just say, not very publicly friendly, and he agitated some of the neighbors. Well, we didn't do this, tried to do it in hindsight, and it didn't work. So this is when I started doing it before going to meetings, is go to door, meet the neighbors, ask them what their concerns are, try to address their concerns, and then try to show what the project's benefits are to the neighborhood and what it can bring to the community, and try to relieve their fears from the distraction. Because especially in really rural counties, that you think that because they don't have a lot of planning and zoning ordinances, that it's easier to get developments done. But the less ordinances and guidelines they do have, this is when it's critical that you get with the neighbors, because public outcry can shut down a project quicker than having an ordinance issue. So it's getting ahead of that and getting the neighborhood support on your side before going to planning and zoning. Because once it's got to planning and zoning, then their perspective is, well, they're trying to get it approved before they ever even talk to us, versus talking to them and say, look, we're going to planning and zoning. This is what we're wanting to do. This is how it benefits you. And what concerns do you have? And try to address those concerns up front.
Okay. So I guess benefits will be like it's going to bring in more jobs or just increase the local economy, or what are some other examples?
Well, one thing is relieving fears. Like if you're bringing in something, well, let's use the North Dakota example. Let's say you're doing oil field crew lodging, and one of the neighborhood concerns or concerns of the neighbors is, well, that's a lot of transient workers that are going to be in, and addressing that from a standpoint that, yes, they're going to be inside that compound, that every one of them has background checks. They actually have, they're not transient like homeless, that they have a lot of background clearance with the oil fields. Our contracts with the oil fields basically allow us to eject or evict anybody that does not follow our guidelines, and go over what our guidelines are for the community interaction, things like that, to show them that we've already looked at that and we're proactively addressing it.
Okay. And for each of these transactions or developments, are you syndicating the equity for it, or how's that work on the financing side?
Well, it depends on the size of the project. Usually anything under about $10 million, I don't syndicate, because I have enough equity partners that are able to handle the equity side of the development. with one or two equity partners versus having to syndicate and bring in multiple people. And then I have several banks that, like I said, anything under $10 million is fairly easy to accomplish. Now, when you get into bigger, like when you get over $100 million, then you may very well have to syndicate and do a PPM and raise money from multiple people. I'm just fortunate. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I've got a lot of investors that I've made a lot of money over the years, and they basically call me wanting to know if I've got anything else that I'm looking at doing versus me having to go look. But even if you're just starting out, one of the keys to raising money is, number one, not asking for money, but shifting the mindset to you're offering them an opportunity to make money on your project. You're presenting them the opportunity to be a part of it. You're not asking them for money. You're giving them the opportunity. There's plenty of other people that are in line wanting it. And given that scarcity that I'm giving you an opportunity to be in it, but I need a decision. And it's just that minor mindset shift makes a huge difference when dealing with investors.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've actually been thinking about that because I have some investors I've been working with, and it's like, do I want to put them in this deal or that deal? And it's like, well, if I could just use my own capital, I mean, obviously I have to grow my own business and I can't be too greedy, but at the same time, it's kind of like, I kind of feel that kind of the biasness in there. And it's like, well, I'm making money for him. And that's kind of almost seemed like as a cost on certain deals, but maybe not a good way to look at it, but I know exactly what you're saying in terms of you're providing that opportunity. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, that makes sense. And you said something key there, though. And capital structures is huge on when you're doing any kind of investing, but especially when you're doing big development projects. And that's basically equity, debt, and reserves. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to use an equity partner because I've got enough money to do this. Very rarely do I put money in my own projects because of what's called opportunity cost. If I put all my money in one project, I can't take advantage of other opportunities. So that's the cost of having my money in that project. Whereas if I've got $500,000 sitting in the bank that allows me to qualify this project with the banks, I use an equity partner for that project, and then another project comes along, I can take care of that one. Okay, yeah, I gave my equity partner 25 or 30% of this project. Whereas if I used my own money, I'd have had 100%. But all of a sudden, I'm able to do 5 projects with that same money that are going to make 10 times more than what if I'd have tied up all my money in one project. So does that make sense for what I'm saying on that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's definitely the mindset I need to get more into. I think I just need more investors and more opportunities. And once I have that, then it's like there's no question I absolutely have to use investor capital for these deals because I just can't possibly have enough money to do all the deals myself. So totally hear you. So so when you're applying for the debt financing part of it, you could apply for 5 different projects and you just never use the cash in the bank. They just look at it as part of your personal financial statement and be like, oh yeah, this guy's net worth is doing pretty good, so we're going to approve this loan. That's what you're saying, right?
100%. And then you do have the reserves. If something gets sidetracked, you do have reserves there to where you can take care of that and keep everything moving. Reserves are critical. That's pretty much what happened to everybody in 2008. The ones that went belly up, myself included, was, back then we were taught that money sitting in the bank was dead money. If it wasn't working, it wasn't doing you any good. I had no clue what opportunity cost was at that point in time, and had everything, all of my cash out, and I had lines of credit with plenty of room on them. But here's the thing, the banks control the lines of credit. You can have perfect credit, you can have every bill paid, you can have open lines of credit, but if the bank wakes up the next morning and says, we're going to close these lines of credit, the market's starting to get squirrely, and we're going to pull in some risk, and they close lines of credit. Well, those are no longer reserves because they're no longer available. So it's critical that you have liquid assets. It doesn't have to be cash. It can be treasuries, anything that you can liquidate quickly. And one of the things that I do consider a liquid asset is Bitcoin. Is it very volatile? Yes. Long term, though, it outperforms every other asset. So as long as you know the volatility of it, the range it operates in, you can use Bitcoin. It's very liquid. I can sell it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. You can't get to your cash in the bank that often. So it's having those reserves that are hard assets that you can turn into liquid cash quick, and cash is one of them as well. So the key is don't use lines of credit for reserves. They can be closed by the bank without any fault of your own.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's exactly what people need to hear as we're heading into probably the next recession, right? Everyone at least assumes a market softening, maybe not quite the crash that we saw in 08, but definitely a market adjustment coming up in the next few quarters. Do you agree with that?
I think we're going to see a slowdown. Whether or not we're going to see a dip or not, I don't know. And that's the thing. People talk about the real estate market. There's not a real estate market. There's multiple real estate markets. Each area is completely different. Like here on the Gulf Coast where we're at, we may see a slowdown from a standpoint of days on market of finished projects, but I really don't think we're going to see a retracement in price just because of the demand. And other areas may see a dip. I don't think it'll be as drastic as 08, 09, but it very well could be. Nobody can really say one way or the other. You got pretty much equally split. You got some people saying that we're not going to see anything. It's not going to affect real estate whatsoever. And you got others saying that it is. I think we are going to see some effects. I just don't think it's going to be as broad as it was in 08 and 09.
Yeah. I mean, at that point too, it was really an international systemic issue across the world, right? And I think there was a ripple effect even years later after that in Europe. So yeah, it was a much different thing. Another one friend I have in my network put it very succinctly. It's like there's a big difference between a recession being caused by real estate versus real estate just being affected by a recession. So, and I think 08 was definitely caused by obviously all that speculation, mortgage-backed security, and all that different stuff. Whereas this one, it's not quite that. It's everything else going on.
Yeah, it's a whole different macroeconomic climate than it was 08, 09. And like your friend said, we don't have near the rot, for lack of a better word, that was in real estate back then. There was it was wild watching some of the stuff that was going on, both with banks, with investors, and literally every level in real estate. Some of the mortgage brokers, if you could fog a mirror, they give you 110% loan on a property.
Yeah, those ninja loans, right? No income, no job, no assets. That makes sense. So back to those local jurisdictions, I had a quick question. Would you consider the Alabama area to be a little more development friendly? Is it a little easier to get stuff done?
Well, that's what we're talking about. Areas within areas. Alabama itself is relatively friendly on development. Baldwin County and the city of Gulf Shores, city of Orange Beach are a lot more stringent just because it's a lot more development packed in a tight area. And we're pretty close to development capacity from a standpoint of what people want to see in the area.
Okay. So he's got even more pushback from neighbors and other stuff like that at a certain point, I guess.
100%.
Okay. Interesting. So, but do you primarily focus on what you said you did a project in North Dakota? So are you just kind of opportunistically doing throughout the country, or there's certain specific markets where you'll like or prefer to do development deals?
Well, active development, yeah, I'm only doing in Baldwin County, Alabama, which is Gulf Shores, Alabama is the main focus. And we focus even on a narrower niche. We pretty much only do waterfront properties, target high-end vacation rental investor grade properties. And I've backed off on the active development side as much because I coach and consult in development. Now, I coach and consult literally across the country and down into the Caribbean. I have a client in California that I'm consulting with on a large development. I've got another client in South Carolina, and then I've got one client that is talking with me about a development in Idaho, and then looking at doing some stuff in the Caribbean with some clients. But that's more the consulting side of things than the active development. I still do a lot of investing, but I tend to buy stuff that's already up and running and cash flowing, both real estate and businesses.
Okay. What kind of businesses, cash flowing businesses are you usually buying?
Well, one opportunity we recently took advantage of is a minority interest in a medical marijuana company in Mississippi. And the reason for it was I had the stigma of I'd never invest in something like that. But this company, the guy that's running it is really big into educating people about the uses of medical marijuana. And I had already been doing a lot of research on like CBD, and I've tried CBD and had actually had some benefits of CBD. He went on to explain further the full spectrum benefits of medical marijuana, and that it wasn't what they talk about in the movies and all the propaganda about it. So I started looking at it from that standpoint and what one level had done for me, and his education of the rest of it helped me to like, okay, well, I can see the potential use of it. And I know people that had said before that it's not a gateway drug and everything else that's been put out there. And then doing deeper research into the benefits of it and what all it has done, basically I reached the conclusion the only reason that it has been stigmatized was because it was going to take a lot of money away from big pharmacy back in the 60s. That's how long it's been suppressed. Is they've got studies back in the 60s showing the medical benefits of it. And I'm big into nature and doing things supplement wise. So I look at this more of as a medicinal herb. And that's what it is. It's just they've been able to standardize it and do things with it that wasn't available then. So I believe it can be a huge benefit for people. And it's in Mississippi. It's brand new legislation in place for it. So it's a huge opportunity. It's benefiting people and it makes me money. So that's, if I can benefit people and make money at the same time, then that's what I look, that's kind of opportunities I look for.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't realize that legislation was just passed in Mississippi, but that's definitely very interesting. So are they producing the marijuana, or are they just running dispensaries, or kind of both?
Well, the company that I invested in is going to be a grower, producer, distributor, and transporter. Not distributor, grower, producer, and transporter. And then their contracts are with dispensaries, so they're not doing retail product. It's strictly direct to business dispensaries.
Okay. Not to spend too much time on that, but one last question. I've heard of kind of some horror stories, at least in Colorado, with I think just I don't know. I've heard a lot of these businesses have had to operate on a lot of cash basis, given like at least banks, federally regulated banks, were uncomfortable having them as clients. And I know some credit unions were more open to that, but I just heard about like a lot of murders and stuff and just like some kind of Wild West things happen. And so I'm assuming that the company invested has some security measures. Or has that ever been discussed with you and your team?
Yes, that was discussed in detail. And one of the biggest things was the Mississippi legislation is written up where it's Mississippi for Mississippi. That's why we only have a minority position in the company, is because it has to be a Mississippi-based company. And that's one of the things that happened in California is the cartel came in and literally took over things. And it is the Wild West, cash, things like that. But Mississippi also set it up to where there are several community banks in Mississippi, large community banks that are Mississippi-based banks that said, well, we'll get on board with this. And since it's all staying inside Mississippi, not crossing lines, then it's all straight bank transactions. That everything will be done electronic wire transfers, things like that. It won't actually be a cash-based business. And if it had been cash, I don't know if I would have invested in it, because with a cash-based business, it's really hard to track how much money actually comes in and what the actual profit is. Whereas with it going through a bank and electronic transfers, it's a lot easier to track.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot easier to audit, I guess, for auditors and yourself, your team, just doing due diligence and everything like that, right?
100%.
Yeah, I never thought of it from that perspective. That makes a ton of sense. So, back to the land development. How do you? Well, I guess you have your niche that you're talking about, the waterfront properties. So you already really know what the purpose is going to be. Is there a way though to kind of look at a piece of land and say, this is 100 acres. It'll be good for a subdivision of homes or something, and then you can back into the purchase price for the raw land? What's usually your method for backing into that purchase price?
You described it, but one of the things is to make certain that it's something that you can get approved. Don't try to put your purchase price out there for what you think you can get approved, and put in your contract, if you're going that route, put in the contract contingent upon approval of your project. Propose that to the seller of the property and let them know what you're wanting to try to do there. And if they buy into the project, get them to, okay, well, I'll agree to pay you this amount. Your property is only worth this amount the way it sits, but I'm willing to pay you this amount if I can get this project approved. That's how you sell them on that clause, because you can usually sell it from a standpoint of they're going to make 30 or 40% more for their property than if they wanted to close in 60 days and you don't know whether or not you can get a project approved. And the way I back into it is, all right, let's just say the 100 acres and a subdivision. I do my due diligence, and a subdivision is needed in the area, and it's in an area in front of the growth path, the path of progress. That's one of the things you want to do, is make sure that you're always in front of what direction the area is growing in versus on the backside. Because if you end up on the backside, you can end up being like one of the small town squares that I'm sure you've driven through a small town that there's all the businesses are almost shuttered, but then you can go to a bypass outside of town and it's flourishing. That's the same principle. Make sure that you're in front of that path of progress. And then, okay, 100 acres can be a subdivision, and I can get 4 lots per acre, but I'm going to lose 20% for infrastructure, utilities, holding ponds, whatever else, greenways, whatever else is needed, sidewalks, roads, that thing. So that leaves you 80 acres that you can get um, lots on, and you can get 4 per that. So that's 320 lots. Then you just evaluate, okay, can I sell 320 lots in this area? Yes, great. What can I get for lots? And I usually use it on the basis of what can I get for lots now, not future appreciation. That's just an extra little safety factor to have in there. What can I get for lots then? Then you factor in what is your infrastructure cost. You got to get in your underground utilities, your storm sewer, your roads, your curb, your gutter, and sidewalks. All right, what's that going to cost me? What do I want to make? And I usually figure about a 40% margin on projects, because you are looking at longer term. People are like, man, that's crazy to make that much money. But you're looking at 2 years before you've got a product that you're even able to start selling. And you've got to fact, okay, so if it's 2 years, best case scenario, that's only a 20% return annually. All right. So you've got your cost, you know what you can sell the lots for, and then you basically take out the 40%, and that's your offer price. And I usually start a little bit lower than that to give some room for negotiation. You don't offer your highest number off the bat.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. That's kind of what I was thinking in terms of these percentages to mark it down from and all that. So back to the structure in the agreement, is there a certain time frame you usually use until the first earnest money deposit becomes non-refundable? And do you use like multiple earnest money deposits for each milestone reach?
Well, I usually typically only use one earnest money deposit, and then the milestone complete, like if it's upon project approval, then it's not hard until you reach project approval. And then usually, and it depends on the project, 30 to 60 day close after project approval. And it may not be full project approval. It could be contingent project approval. Contingent project approval means that all the entities have met and they've formally approved the project contingent upon these however many items, 5 items. Then if you agree to handling those 5 items, then that is contingent approval. That means the minute that you've gotten those 5 items taken care of, then you have full approval. If you don't take care of those 5 items, then the approval is negated. So usually the clause is upon contingent approval, because if you have to wait until full approval and taking care of items, that could be an even longer period down the road. And you can tell people that I can get contingent approval in, say, 6 months or a year. That depends on your area. Different areas have different time frames. One thing I will say on that, if you think you can get it done in 3 months, tell them 6 months. If you think you can get it done in 6 months, tell them you're basically double that time frame, because very rarely do you get it in the time frame. That's best case scenario, and it very rarely happens.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because you definitely don't want to go back to the seller and say, sorry, Mr. Seller, I need an extra 12 months or something, because they were already waiting and don't want to potentially have the deal fall apart because they're just tired of waiting. And you're like, well, I'm just going to sell it to someone else. Someone called me yesterday and offered me the so-and-so. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So have you ever, or do you advise your clients to sell at these various stages, or do you usually advise to just take it all the way through development? Because I realized you could sell an entitled project, for example, to a developer that's ready to start breaking ground. And obviously you could do horizontal development and then sell it to someone who's looking to only go vertical immediately. So what stages do you think are best to sell at from your experience?
Well, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize. There's many stages that you can exit at. Every time that you've added value to the property, then you're at a stage that you can sell it. One thing is I usually put in my contracts the right to clear the underbrush and open it up, which is basically improving the quality of the land and all anyway. You're not disturbing it. You're not trying to do any clearing or grubbing. You're just opening it up. That alone lets people see a different beauty of the property. When things is overgrown and you can't see from the edge of the road 10 foot into the property, it's kind of hard for most people to visualize what can go on that property. However, if you go in there and bush hog or mulch all the underbrush and leave the mature timber, starts to look more like a park that somebody could play in, then they start seeing more value. At that point, you've added value, and somebody else may offer you more for the land at that point in time. That's a great exit point. Uh, Another exit point, like you said, is getting plans up and getting contingent approval. Contingent approval, developers that are interested in doing that type of project, like, okay, there's less risk now. Now all I got to do is take care of these contingencies, and I've got an approved project. You can sell at that point in time. Like you said, you can get the horizontal work in and sell it straight to the person that wants to do the vertical build out, or you can build it turnkey all the way to final construction, selling finished product. Most of the developments that I get involved in are going all the way through to turnkey finished product and sell. Now, some of the consulting and coaching students I have exited at multiple points in there. I think the highest and best use of your time to get out, though, is after you have entitlement, because that's when you've added the most value without having to put in a ton of money into the infrastructure side of things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of the sweet spot there. That makes a lot of sense. Because then, yeah, it's definitely require a lot more capital and like start changing the equation if you haven't like lined up the financing or kind of figured it out that far. So, okay. And I imagine that the budget that you need to do any of these projects will depend on, I guess, the size of the land and everything else. Is there like a general like minimum budget you think someone should have to before they consider taking on a development project?
I'd say the biggest thing is make sure that especially if this is what you're doing, if you're not doing this as a side project or a part-time job, if you don't have some other source of income, is make certain that you've got 2 years worth of personal expenses set aside to where you can live your life without interrupting it to a great degree, especially if you have family. Wives and kids tend not to understand the doing without, because you're waiting on this project to be approved. So making sure that you've got 2 years worth of personal expenses, but really after 0809, I don't know if anybody caught that, but I got clocked hard 0809. I basically went to work less than $0 and did not want to start back fixing and flipping or anything like that. I wanted to do land development. So I basically started back doing land development with $0, did it all with equity partners and one bank that knew my track record and was willing to go strictly on the basis of my track record. I don't recommend that to everybody, but it is something that can be done. But the biggest thing is making sure that you've got the money to handle your personal life for that time frame, because usually you're not able to find investors that are wanting to front your personal life as well as the business side of it as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess these equity partners, they're paying for the equity, like equity portion of the purchase price for the land, but are they also funding the soft costs for the engineering firm and other stuff like that?
It depends on what you set up with them. And the initial ones I did, equity partners brought in all the money for the land, the soft cost, and everything, legal all of it at first. And I gave up a little bit more percentage of the project, but I still maintained control of the project. I didn't give up enough percentage that I didn't still have full control of that project. And it was worth it for them because of the returns they were going to make on that money.
Okay. Yeah, I have one friend that's working on a project, and he said that investor funds like $100,000 that covers all the soft costs, and then he'll pay him back, say, 400,000 once the project's completed. Just curious what returns your equity partners are making in ballpark.
Usually, I'm between 30 and 40% annually on my equity partners.
Okay.
So that's usually, and that's probably overly generous from what if you were trying to do it, because the one thing a lot of investors do is they give away too much at the beginning. And if you have a problem, you don't have any room to sell additional equity. But unfortunately, where we're at also is there are high margin with these investor grade waterfront properties. There's a higher margin in those properties than, say, an inland subdivision that is affordable housing. That's a whole different market and a whole different animal from a standpoint of an investment. But the key is, what do your investors want? If they're only wanting a 12% annual return on their money, then that's how you figure out what percentage of equity to give them. If they're wanting more, then calculate it up. If it's still worth your side, then that's what you do. One of the keys is not worrying about what somebody else is going to make, but what are you not going to make if you don't put the deal together? What are you going to lose? Because trying to hold on to too much of a project and ending up with zero is not a very viable option either.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. It's another good quote that, you know, half a watermelon's a whole lot more than 100% of a grape. And even beyond that, to your point, it's like sometimes you don't even get the grape if the whole deal is just not even going to go through. And I've had certain transactions like that where I had something under contract and I was like, I really don't think that I could find a buyer for this. But then I find another investor friend that has some buyer. It's like, oh, all right, well, we just turned $0 into something here. So definitely worth giving that investor a piece of that profit to get the deal done as a small comparison. So I know on your website you have a couple different things. If people want to go check them out, you have a land development profits course. Could you talk about that a little bit?
But the land development profits course is a home study course. That's basically, and it's the 10 steps of land development. I go through how to do due diligence. I do a lot on capital structures, about the equity, about the debt, and about reserves. Also, the mindset shift from a standpoint of you're not asking people for money. You're allowing them an opportunity to participate in your projects. And then I actually do a good bit about mindset. And that's critical, is you can literally make money in anything that somebody else has made money in. So don't get into land development because you're chasing money. Get into land development because it's something you enjoy doing. You enjoy messing with land and seeing how you can improve it. Land development to me is my artistic expression. Taking raw land, that's my blank canvas. What can I create on it? So I go through all of that, go through creating relationships, because land development is about relationships. Relationships with your bankers, relationships with your investors, relationships with the community, planning and zoning, various entities. But really, when you boil it down to, all businesses are about relationships. You get much further ahead in any business by building key relationships. And then the different exit points that we just talked about, I do a deeper dive into that. And it's just really a course that somebody could take that course and they stumble through it, but they could take a piece of real property and get a project approved going through that course. And then I do one-on-one consulting. I teach velocity of money and how to copy the bank's blueprint to have your money work in multiple places at one time, which is truly the only way you can get ahead long term. And then I use digital assets, which is cryptocurrency. I don't like using the term cryptocurrency because most of them aren't currencies. They are cryptographic. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It can be used as a medium exchange, but more importantly, it's a store of value. It's one of the hardest assets there is on this planet. People will say it's volatile, but really volatility is what makes an investor money. People say volatility is bad when it's working against them. They say volatility is good when it's working for them. The only way you make money in real estate is real estate's volatile. If it didn't go up in value, you wouldn't make money. And there's plenty of people that are traders that make a lot of money in down markets. They short stocks, they short positions. So volatility is how an investor makes money. It's just knowing what the risk metrics are and structuring properly for them.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely interesting, and it makes a lot of sense to see it from that perspective. So is there a website where people can go to check out these different courses and the digital assets and all that?
Definitely cowboyjoe.me, cowboyjoe.me. That is my website, and it's got ways to connect with me. I do a twice monthly wisdom chat on Wednesdays. The next one is this. Well, this is a recorded, it's not live, but basically you can go to my Facebook pages or the website and check that schedule. Every other Wednesday, I do a wisdom chat that is free, and it will be various topics. It could be a topic in land development. It could be a topic in digital assets. It could be a topic around mindset. Also a coach in mindset for Dr. Trivedi, who is known as Dr. Rewire. He literally rewires people's brains around different things. So cowboyjoe.me, and then you can also schedule a 20-minute kickoff call with me to evaluate where you fit into various programs.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that's all the questions that I wanted to hit on. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and do this episode. I've definitely learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners gained a lot. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or anything like that?
I want to thank you for inviting me on the show, because this is my highest value. I love teaching people. I love learning and teaching, especially around investment and finance. The more value that I can add to other people, my primary mission is to help people become financially independent through various strategies, but more important, the mindset. Because I tell people, the most important real estate you'll ever develop is that 6 inches between your ears, because if you don't develop it, the rest of it gets very difficult to handle and operate. But if you develop that real estate, you can literally do anything that you set your mind to.
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, again, thanks for coming on. This has been great. So totally agree with you on the constant development. I'm always a voracious learner, always constantly consuming intelligence. So here, there.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, that's another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. Thank you for tuning in. Please be sure to leave a review and subscribe on whatever channel you're using to listen or watch these episodes. And also be sure to go to scalablerealestateinvesting.com, scroll to the bottom, and fill out the form to sign up for our email. And you could also reach me directly at mason@scalablerealestateinvesting.com. That's MASON at scalablerealestateinvesting.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me to either partner on deals or even be considered to do your own episode on this podcast. Thanks again, and have a great day.